Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. In recent weeks, Sickouts by school employees in Durham have upended the daily routines of parents and students. The tactics are the latest front in efforts by government employees to push for better pay. The effort is now drawing the attention of state lawmakers and inviting discussion of whether to ban sickouts in the future. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran has been digging into state laws banning work stoppages, and he joins us now to break it all down. Will, good to see you again.
Happy to be here.
First off, give us a quick overview of what's happening in Durham. Who's protesting and what are their demands?
So this started with pay concerns for the classified staff. So that's basically the non-teachers, non-counselors who work at schools, the bus drivers, the maintenance people, janitors, cafeteria workers. The school board had made some financial errors that were going to maybe lead to them getting a pay cut. And so they said, wait a second, this is not our fault. This is your fault. And they called out of work. And the question, really is, was that proper to do? And, so far it's shut down schools for about 4 days now. That's, like you said, that's really disruptive to parents who are trying to figure out their schedules. But it's also put a lot of attention on their demands. And so far they seem to have been making some pretty good progress in terms of getting their demands met by school leaders.
Now, what are they asking for?
They really right now are just asking for two main things: a seat at the table to kind of have more transparency in these discussions moving forward, and a fix to their concerns over pay.
Now, government stoppages like this aren't unique to Durham. You report that they're happening more often across the country. Why is that?
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast series on the state of the economy and the labor movement and everything. But very briefly, in the post-COVID economy, people have heard, it's hard for people to fill jobs. Unemployment rate is at historic lows. Wages are rising, to try to fill some of these, hard to fill jobs. And that gives workers a little bit more leverage. In the private sector, as wages have risen there, government employees have, maybe started jumping ship to private sector jobs or started saying, hey, wait a second, why aren't we getting paid this amount of money? And so there's just kind of, not only do workers have more leverage right now, but also there's this private sector, public sector, playing out as well.
Now, strikes by government employees are illegal in North Carolina, but you report that there's this simmering debate over whether this is even a strike, right?
Yeah. The people who've been calling out say this is absolutely not a strike because, they don't want to get arrested for striking. Most states it is illegal for government workers to strike. This is what's commonly referred to as a sick out. When government employees kind of organize, band together to all collectively call in sick or take PTO or, whatever else, they're doing to legally take the day off so that they're not running afoul of this rule on striking. But, the question kind of becomes, okay, well, isn't that just a strike in all but name? And so that's kind of what we looked at here, and whether the government needs to do more to tighten up those anti-striking laws to prevent things like this from happening again.
Now, how does state law actually define a government employee strike?
It's a little vague on that. The rules really just against a organized effort to stop or slow down work. And so when people are all organizing together to call out sick at the same time, there's some questions of, hey, is this a strike? And, other states, there have been examples in Wisconsin and Nevada that I found that, they have gone that other direction. They said, no, you can't do these sickouts. This is a strike. But here in North Carolina, it's a tactic that has been used for years and by all accounts, is not being cracked down on in Durham by law enforcement.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about what lawmakers are saying about the sickouts in Durham and how the issue could show up in the 2024 elections. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran about the rise of government work stoppages. Will, in the wake of the Durham sickouts, state lawmakers have started talking about whether we need to change state law. What are they saying?
Yeah, there is this concern that, hey, this has, been so disruptive and really seems to, violate at least the spirit of the law, if not necessarily the letter of the law. These are all just kind of starting to bubble up right now, these conversations. There's really nothing concrete, but there is a definite sense of frustration with some state lawmakers about this whole situation, and really saying, look, especially with schools, like, y'all need to be thinking of the kids first. And, it's no secret that in North Carolina, we've seen some test scores suffer in recent years, and they say, kids aren't going to be learning if schools are shut down, and that's what the main focus needs to be.
You also spoke with candidates for labor commissioner. It sounds like we'll hear more about this on the campaign trail. What did they tell you?
Yes. So one of the Republican candidates for labor commissioner, there's 4 of them who are running, but one of them is State Representative John Hardister. He's a Republican from Greensboro, and he's also a top member of Republican House leadership. And he said that, there are conversations percolating about this issue. He said this is a de facto strike. Strikes are illegal. He told me, look, I support government employees being able to exercise their First Amendment rights, but you can't just shut down schools. And so he wants more to happen at the legislature on that. He said if he does get elected labor commissioner, he'll have an even bigger bully pulpit than he does now, even as a state legislator, to kind of push the legislature to pass some laws on this front. On the other side, I also spoke with Braxton Winston, a former Charlotte city councilman who's the Democratic nominee for labor commissioner. There's no primary on the Democratic side of the aisle. He's taking the exact opposite tack. He's saying, no, we need to have much more labor-friendly laws in North Carolina. He wants there to be collective bargaining between the government and workers, which is currently banned. He says we need to, be more cognizant of workers' demands. They're paid for with taxpayer money, and his position is that they're going to perform much better service for their communities if they're happier and better paid and just doing better at their jobs.
As you said before the break, the Sickouts in Durham have yielded some results, and fairly quickly. What does that tell us about the effectiveness of these tactics and the leverage in this situation?
Yeah, I think those two things are really closely tied together because this is a tactic that would not work at all if this group didn't have the leverage of, large buy-in from the employees. If they only had, 5-10% of employees, willing to do this, then it would have kind of fizzled out. But, by all accounts, they've got a large number of employees on board, really broad buy-in. And I think that's part of why, the school board has been willing to pretty quickly sit down with them, try to, negotiate an end to this, give in to some of their demands that they have. I think it should also be mentioned that Durham is one of the most progressive places in the state. If there was any, school board that's going to be more amenable to, labor demands, it's, probably the more progressive ones.
I wonder, just since government strikes in North Carolina are illegal, and since some do see this as a de facto strike, is anyone actually calling for the enforcement of state law against these workers?
Not that we've seen so far. Like we said, they've been very careful, the organizers, to, say this is not a strike, this is not a strike. And, there have been no reports of anyone being arrested. Some of our reporters who are on the ground in Durham talking to folks say that that's not really a concern that the protesters have raised. And so it seems to be, that they're just, everyone's focused on meeting and coming to the bargaining table and just kind of getting beyond this.
Well, if there's no enforcement, do you think this situation in Durham will embolden more government workers to have sickouts or strikes or walk off the job or whatever you want to call it?
Not necessarily. This, as we said earlier, this is part of a larger trend of, kind of more aggressiveness in the labor movement. But this, specific example of sickouts, I talked to the NCAE, the North Carolina Association of Educators, who's, it's their Durham chapter that's leading this. And they said, look, this is a matter of last resort when people do these sickouts. And NCAE has been behind some, they call them days of protest. They don't like the word sickout. In the past, in 2018, there was a statewide one that led to around 20,000 teachers calling off work on the same day and protesting in Raleigh. But they are careful to let people know, hey, this isn't something to just take lightly. Like, this needs to be a really serious decision. And even other state employees, you haven't really seen this same tactic adopted in other parts of government workforces. And I talked to CNIC, which is another state employee lobbying group, and their director, Artis Watkins, told me there's a reason for that. They think that this is a counterproductive tactic. They say, look, it's Republicans who are in charge of the legislature. They don't like it when they see workers protesting like this, as we've discussed on this podcast here. And they said it's much better long run to work with them, to have constructive discussions with them, than it is to just be outside marching and holding signs. And, Scenic was able to get a $15 an hour minimum wage for all state workers a few years ago that actually explicitly excluded school workers when that happened. And, I think there might be some connections that people make there.
Well, I know that you'll be watching this one closely. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
That's WRAL state government reporter Will Doran. For his deep dive on government sickouts and strikes, visit the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.